Anne Frank's diary is very famous, but just to be sure, because it's well known, but not everybody has read it. I'll tell you just a little bit about the original book, and then I'll present to you the process of making it with an emphasis on the visual side of the work. So Anne was born in Germany. Her family fled the Nazis to Amsterdam, that later was occupied. Her father had a business for jam congealant, this ingredient that makes jam sticky. And they hid for two years inside an annex to the her father's business. Eventually they were found out, were discovered, and everybody except her father were perished in the concentration camps. And her father later came back and discovered the diary and decided to publish it as in memory of his daughter. And he also founded an establishment, the Anne Frank Fund, that is located in Basel. That it's a non-profit organization that deals with publishing the diary in all the many languages, and all the revenues are directed towards humanitarian causes. So this is where we come in. Oops, I skipped one. All right, so it was a commissioned work. Ari Folman was a film director with whom I've been collaborating for many years. Got a call from the Anne Frank Funds with the suggestion to do this kind of adaptation into graphic novel, and later it also became a film. And our initial response was not to do it, because we felt that everything was already said and done on this topic, and also we're a bit wary about the status of a symbol. She became a symbol for many things, and many times she's used to justify different kinds of ideologies from the left and from the right. She's kind of a pop icon. There's a rapper in the United States who tattooed her image on his face. She's a symbol for hooligans of a football club in Italy, and in the beginning we didn't want to have anything to do with it, but we realized that somebody is going to do it, so we gave it a chance and reread the diary, this time as adults. It is a compulsory read in high schools in Israel, so we read it as teenagers, but as adults we discovered something that is someone who is very far from being a symbol. She's sometimes an annoying teenager. She's very funny, and she's a prolific writer. She had a huge talent for prose, and so we decided to do it exactly for that reason, to try to show the complexity of her character. For me, it was specifically to emphasize her sense of humor, and to push her away from this kind of symbolic status. And the other reason was that everybody reads less these days, and comics are more approachable, especially for young readers. So we hoped it would be a gateway to her story, not in any form, of course, to replace the original text, but to get kids acquainted and interested in this book. So once we decided to take on the commission, the first thing I did was to get acquainted with her physically, what she looks like, and these are photos of her at age 8 or 9, and based on that, I did this little sculpture that could help me understand what she looks like from different angles in the book. I'm sorry, going back. And so this way I kind of got acquainted with her through my hands, in a way. That was 3D. And these are different examples of my work. And as you can see, I try to work in different styles for each project. On the left top side is a frame from a film called Waltz with Bashir that I did together with Ari Folman. Below it, frames from 2 other feature films, and on the right hand you have a number of children's books. So I try to adjust the style to the text, what the text wants and needs. And in this case, I drew my inspiration from European illustration, Central European illustration from the beginning of the 20th century. In this case, I'm showing you 2 images from a magazine that was called Simplicissimus, and all the best illustrators in Europe worked there. And the idea behind it was that if Anne saw these comics, it wouldn't look unfamiliar to her. It would be something that is organic to her world. And so this style, this is my interpretation of that style of drawing, and this is the first page of the book. And this is an example that I'm going to talk a little bit about the work process. So this is a page that Ari made. His job was to read and reread the diary and decide. You would read every 10 pages a number of times and try to understand what is essential in the text, what we cannot throw out. Because if we were to adapt the whole thing, it would be a 3,000 long page comics novel that nobody would read. So there was a need for some reduction. And he would come up with ideas of like a director of a film. So these kind of very fast, sketchy drawings are ideas for scenes. And this is what he would do. And later I would take this and turn it into this. That was the Ari sketch, and this is my drawing. There were many adaptations of this text to comics. What's special about our project is that this is the only case where we use the original text from the diary in the book. So the original text is in the voiceover. In comics, this is the narrator speaking. This is the light blue rectangle on top. This is from the original book, and all the comics balloons are made up dialogue that Ari came up with to bring more life to the characters. I'm going to give you, this is the second double spread in the book, and I'm going to use it to show you what kind of decisions I made as an illustrator, and in general what illustration does to a text. So here Anne is meeting for the first time her diary. I'm saying meeting because she personified it, and she called the diary Kitty. And on the right hand you can see this image of Anne writing in her diary for the first time. And I was not happy with this image because it's iconic. It doesn't, we know there is a famous photo of Anne writing, and it doesn't add anything to the text. So although it was already finished, I came back to it, and I made up this illustration. Oh, the clicker is funny. This one. Because I want to illustrate the psychological layer of the text, to add something to it and not just show you again what you already know. And here she introduces us to Kitty, her new best friend. Oh, clicker. Let's go back. I have a preview of what's to come. Okay, so beside being a diary of a funny and talented teenage girl, this book is also a document. So it was important to preserve as much as possible of the historic facts or what people look like. These are photos of Anne's family, and this is what they look like in the comics. And you can see that the tone of their depiction is generally the tone of the treatment that we chose for the book. It's like a loving caricature. It's not cartoony, but it's not absolutely realistic. And these are the workers in Anne's father's office, who kept Anne's family alive for more than 2 years. And this is what they look like in the book. And this is the place itself. On the left side you can see the office, and the right side is the warehouse, and you can go visit it in Amsterdam. So this is what it looked like. In fact, the black and white photo is what the living room looked like right after the war. And on the right side there was a reconstruction made by the Anne Frank Museum. So I used that. I used their research of what utensils they used and all of that as reference for my book. And so on the right side, you can see this kind of informative historical approach. It's like in a biology book or something, this cross section of their living space. It wasn't an attic. It was a whole kind of building that had a secret entrance from the office building. And together with the Frank family, there were 4 other Jews that hid together with them. The Van Pels family, friends of Anne's father, and Albert Dossel, or Fritz Peffer. Anne made up new names for the characters in the diary, and this is what they look like in the book. And here is, on the left side, you can see the other family coming into the hiding a bit later, a couple of weeks after the Franks arrived there. And you can see here the peculiar qualities of comics that allow us to play around with space and time and narrative lines. For example, on the left side, you have this comparison between Anne and her older sister, Margot. In every other page in the book, Anne is complaining about the comparison everybody's making between her sister and herself. Margot is the good girl. She's always well-behaved, well-mannered. She doesn't complain much. And Anne is nervous, aggressive, picky. And this subject comes up again and again in the book. And in our adaptation, we were able to condense that. Instead of addressing this entry every time in the book, we created this one page of different kinds of behavior in comparison, and kind of summing up this whole theme that runs out through the book. On the right hand of the same spread, there's an interesting correlation between the structure of a comics page and the building, the annex. These are actual floors and also different panels. Another thing that graphic novels allows one to do is to skip between different timelines or different modes of storytelling. We begin in the top left side with the present of the story. They're sitting around the dinner table. And then we jump to Anne's fantasy. She's imagining, they're hearing on the radio about the birth of a new member of the royal Belgian family. And she imagines herself taking part in the ceremony. And then we skip to her nightmares, And then on the next page, we go back to the present of the story, of her story, and then skip again into fantasy, where she says that she wouldn't mind that her mother would have died. As I said, she was an annoying little teenager sometimes. And all of this happens, all this skipping around happens in one double spread. Another thing that that I could use to my advantage is playing around with her cultural references. She was from a sophisticated Central European family, and art and poetry and history were part of their lives. So I'm using that context to illustrate, again, different feelings that she expressed. For example, here again, we're talking about what is expected from her. So on the right-hand side, this is a takeoff on Klimt, on Gustav Klimt, an Austrian painter. And here it's a depiction of what is expected of her, how she should behave and carry herself. And on the left side, it's a take on Munch's, the Norwegian painter. The Scream depicts the way that she feels inside. How she reacts to all these demands. One of the topics that that run through the book is, of course, food, or the lack of it, its quality. This is where they were naturally very preoccupied with it. And in order to keep it alive and interesting for the reader, I tried to address this motif in different ways. In this case, this kind of personification of animals for the characters. And this is a kind of freedom, again, that you can have in drawing. Of course, she does not compare the different members of her family and the other people in hiding to animals, but this is a freedom that we take according to her views about them. One other thing that comics can do is this kind of synesthesia, a mixture of senses. And here I'm trying to convey the feeling of hearing alarms, bomb sirens throughout the day. And she does it in her writing by this rhythmic repetition of time. 9:30 a.m., 9 a.m. till 12, and again and again and again and again. And then there's the color and of the siren, and the repetition of the image tries to convey exactly that. By the way, where are we in time? The timer is not working, so I don't know. So I'm okay. I have time. One of the things, one of the rules of illustration is not to draw exactly what the text says, because it's redundant. The text already says it. And this is what we are trying to do throughout the novel. But in some cases, Anne's writing is so figurative and is so beautiful that I felt obliged to do the opposite of what I tell my students and draw exactly what, or try to draw as much as I can what is depicted in the text. And this is this kind of abstract metaphor for how they are feeling the dark clouds of war are closing in on them, and they are on this little patch of light. And that's another thing with Anne's writing. As we went along, there were more and more cases where we left big chunks of text unedited, because you really couldn't erase anything. It was very important to leave it as it is, because of its literary quality, because this amazing gift that she had, and it would be absurd to try to cut it up. Here I'd like to show you this process of work on a single double spread. This would be the initial sketch. and it deals with the entry in the diary where they hear on the radio that the Germans had this plan in case of an Allied invasion to flood Amsterdam, to blow up the dams, and she muses on that, and she tries to imagine how that would be, again with her typical humor. So that's the sketch, and this is a more progressed sketch, and this I would do. Usually I work in Photoshop with a digital pen. And I would print out the sketch and go over the lines with a pencil. So this is the pencil drawing, and I would scan it, and then digitally paint it. And these are different stages of the work, adding texture and atmosphere. Oops, I'm sorry. And this would be the finished double spread. I relied heavily on photographic references, but in some cases you don't have it. You don't have the exact angle that you need. And in this case, this is Amsterdam. This is some of the buildings on the street of the secret annex. But it's not exactly true. But what I'm aiming for is this feeling that it looks right. It looks authentic, geographically, I mean. There were, it was very important for Ari and me to preserve some of the more touchy, I would call them, elements in Anne's diary, which were very private. And in the first edition of the book, they were edited out. For example, she's talking about her first period, and then she comes. There's a passage when she recalls the time when she, before the war, she slept at a friend's house, and she offered her that they show each other their breasts, and that passage ends with a sentence: "I must admit, every time I see a female nude, I go into ecstasy. If only I had a girlfriend." Now, it's not necessarily an admission of her sexual preference. It's just thoughts of a teenage girl that's going through natural changes. But her father, who was born in the 19th century, was ironically, by the way, was an officer in the German army in the First World War. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't allow it to be printed, so it was edited out. And after his death, in the later editions, it was put back into the text. And for us, it was very important to keep these things in. First of all, because the sensibilities have changed. It's not that outrageous to talk about your period. And it was part of this humanization of the symbol. We wanted to show the complexity of her character, so it was very important to keep it in, on the one hand. On the other hand, we did want the book to have a wide appeal to people who have conservative views, who don't feel okay with showing nude in a children's book. So it took a while to figure out how to illustrate this moment, and again I drew from her own, from Anne's world, the solution, because she was really into Greek mythology, and in her above her bed you can go to Amsterdam and see some postcards of Greek sculptures. So the nude became a sculpture of nude. So you kind of you figure was my way to figure out how to show nude and still keep it relatively decent. And this was the most outrageous passage, where she examines her anatomy, and with very, very clear prose she describes her private parts, and that of course was out of the question for Otto, and in fact he cut the page out from the diary, Um, but again, for us, it was important to adjust the story to modern sensibilities. And again, it's no longer such a big taboo. On the one side, on the other side, again, you can't be too explicit. And this illustration it took a while to figure out the solution. And here she's explaining something that mesmerizes Peter. That's the boy from the other family that was in hiding, and eventually they had a sort of an affair, which ended up with a kiss. That's it. It was very, very pure and naive. Towards the end of the diary, Anne's writing becomes more and more sophisticated, and the issues that she's addressing are also more adult and grown up. And I particularly like the second frame here, the second row, where she's writing about the role of women in militarized societies that are supposed to bring babies to the world that would eventually turn into soldiers. And she has this vision of what the world would be if it were the other way around, if they taught men to care for babies instead of becoming soldiers. And this is a 14-year-old girl writing in 1943. And these ideas are very progressive for the time. And again, it shows what kind of a special girl she was. Which brings me to the illustration that really moved me the most in working on the book, because it took about 2.5 years, 3 years to make the drawings, and most of it is just pure fun. Although the topic is a bit heavy, but as you can see, she has a great sense of humor, and I love drawing, and there are interesting creative and editorial issues to solve. So the work is fun, although the topic is heavy. But in one passage in the diary, there's this kind of the approach was shattered for me, and it's the place where she's talking about how she hopes that all the hardships that she's going through will turn into material for her writing in the future. And she doesn't want to be anybody's wife. And she wants to be a writer or someone interesting. And this is where my heart broke. Because I think, first of all, because I'm a father to a daughter, and you understand the potential, and you understand that everything that you do for your children is influenced by the idea that they will get to grow up, and she didn't. And so I felt obliged to give her this homage and to draw her the way I imagined she would be, this amazing person, classy lady. And in the background, you can see different frames from the book as covers of famous magazines. And I imagined she would be an editor in a very prestigious publishing house or a newspaper. How much time do I have? Half hour with the questions or without the questions? I know. I'm drawing near to the end actually, so I'm just I'm thinking if I should elaborate on, because I went really fast, so we'll have a lot of time for questions. And this is the last entry of the diary, August 1st, 1944. And this presents a very specific problem in creating an adaptation, because we know that this is the end, and she doesn't. And I can't just stop and make believe that nothing happened, because it happened. on the one hand. But on the other hand, the text doesn't acknowledge it. And in fact, the last entry is not her best prose. She's returning to things that she already wrote on many times, and in fact, it's this kind of teenage rant about who am I, why am I like this and not like that, and how can it be that sometimes I'm like this and sometimes what's going on, which is typical teenage angst. So it took a while, and actually I could come up with an idea for the final illustration only after I illustrated the whole book. In this case, it's just this complex portrait that is composed of different drawings that I already made throughout the book, of different moods and expressions. And it's suitable because that was our goal to begin with. This is, I think, the most important thing in humanism, is the notion that no person is one thing. We're all composed of different conflicting personalities, and we're all many things. And this was the reason why we decided to make the book, to show exactly that she's not a symbol. And we hope that we can show this complexity to prevent the use of her as to justify any kind of ideology except humanism, and it's okay because this is what she believed in, and incidentally this is what I believe in. That nobody's just one thing, and it goes with a denomination, sexual orientation. You can't treat people just by one trait alone. And if we all understand that, I think we live together much better. I think this concludes my presentation, actually, and leaves time for questions. Thank you.
We'll take questions one by one. The mic will go around for anybody who raises their hand.
Yes.
The mic's coming to you, sir.
I can hear them.
Yeah?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so how hardly you rely on references, and what part you use your imagination? Oh, now it came.
In this specific project, I rely on as much reference as I can for the surroundings, for clothing. There is a page where she's describing a lucid dream she had, that she got some money from her father, and she's writing down a long list of things she would buy. All of them are clothes. And these are kind of undercoats and all these kinds of names of garments from the 40s that I had no idea what they are, and I spent like 3 days researching, and I had a lot of fun looking for dresses and shoes and winter shoes, summer shoes, ski sweaters and stuff like that. So because it's a little bit of a document, so there is a lot of research on the one hand. On the other hand, the acting of the characters and the way they behave cannot be too stuffy, too rigid. And I find that using reference for poses, for example, sometimes makes things less expressive. When it's very complicated, when it's like this kind of posture, where you have difficult far shortening and stuff like that, I would take a photo of myself. You can see I don't look like anyone in the book, just to shorten the process. But mainly, this is And again, and even in the text, you have the original text, as I mentioned in the beginning, which is the voiceover, which is taken from the diary, and what people are saying is Ari Folman's humor, based on his interpretation of the characters in the diary.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you for this. This was fascinating. I know the book, but still it was fascinating to hear. Maybe you spoke about that at the beginning and I missed it, so sorry if that's the case. But apart from reading the diary itself, what kind of research did you do on her, on Anne Frank's, if at all? And sorry again if you already answered that.
I had access to the archive, photo archive in Anne Frank's, in the Anne Frank Fund in Basel. And I also went to the museum, to the Anne Frank's house in Amsterdam, just to experience this, the space, where it's not really directly related, but it's interesting. When I told the people in Anne Frank's Fund that I'm going to the museum, they said, "Don't mention that you are working with us." And it turns out that the Anne Frank House and Anne Frank Fund are two separate things, and there's some, in recent years, there's some animosity between them. The initial division was made by Otto Frank, Anne's father, who was a very clever person. And in his life, the diary became, first of all, it became famous first as a play on Broadway. So it already been adapted into different mediums. And following that, there was a movie, and then the book was translated into any imaginable language. So it was becoming successful, and he wanted to spread the so that nobody would hold the whole story. So the text belongs to the fund, and the house belongs to the Dutch government. But now it's run by evangelical Christian organization in Amsterdam, the house. And there was controversy about the mention of Anne's Judaism in the museum. It was not mentioned in any place in the museum that she was specifically mentioned that she was Jewish. She was just this. That's unbelievable, because she was just this Dutch girl that something happened to her, something bad happened to her. And I think this shows, this is, by the way, the diary owes its international success, the original diary, to many things that are specific to this text. It's not only the fact that she wrote a diary, because most teenagers of a certain class wrote diaries. In fact, there was a competition of diaries that she heard on the radio, that in the end the war is drawing near to its end. And there was the Free Dutch Radio from Britain announced that there would be a competition, and she went back and re-edited her diary. She fixed up some passages. She wanted it to be read. But where was I drifted? So no, I'm telling you that the research was just visiting, and but I'm telling you about the animosity between the text and the plays. And the other thing that made it so popular is a bit more sarcastic, I think, is the fact that the book is not exactly about the Holocaust. It's about being in hiding. It's a family drama. The conditions are very harsh, but it has nothing in comparison with what actually happened after they were discovered. And it made it accessible to, for example, Germans. The book is very popular in Germany. I don't think it would be that popular if she kept her diary a bit longer. and she wrote down what happened to her later. And she depicts this angel, the people that worked in the office and kept them and brought them food and bought them clothes for 2 years. These amazing people. They're not the norm. Most people are not like that. Not Dutch, Israeli, whatever. Most people are not saints. And these are the only Dutch people that we meet in the diary. In fact, the Dutch were very complacent with the Nazis, and most of Dutch Jews were destroyed. So this again, this kind of thing that it's very personal, it's very human. The historical drama is huge, but it's not in the book. And I think this contributed to the success of the diary. Of course, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I think as long as people read her story, for me personally, it's not that important that she's Jewish. It has a universal value, and for herself, her Judaism was not important at all. But we have to keep some facts straight. And yes, it is in some place.
Good morning. This is indeed a revelation what you've done. But, it's such a grim story. How do you think children reading it will react? That's one of the questions. And is the comic available, accessible in what languages? A printed version, I mean.
Well, the fact is that the story is not that grim. What happens?
She has a lot of sense of humor. Yeah,
yes,
we've all grown up reading her book. Yeah.
The book was hugely successful.
Yes.
It was translated in the graphic novel. I'm not talking about, of course, the diary. It was translated into 25 different languages. Sadly, none of them yet is none of the languages spoken in India. There's a Thai version, a Mandarin version, and kids love it. I keep hearing about children who reread the book again and again and again and again, because they can, for the same reason I think that the diary was accepted by the audience, original text, because they can relate, because she's a great writer. It's very rare to have a 13-year-old girl writing about her life so well. I think that what's working in the text, and the fact that this talented girl was destroyed and was killed in this horrific event, that's the big irony, but it's not in the book.
Right now, is it available? Is the comic book available to us in India?
In English.
In English.
In English, of course. Yeah, you can buy it downstairs.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be signing, by the way, if you want.
I just wanted to say that I was 13 when I read it, and I did not find it grim. In fact, I wanted to be her. And I started writing my own journal after that, and I said, "Dear Diary," instead of "Dear Kitty."
I think this is a great example of what this is a reason to be optimistic in any case, because people do horrible things to each other, but we have this power of compassion. Mainly women, by the way, but some boys read it as well. That's okay.
No, actually, it was just a comment as an extension that maybe the visuals make it, because there is less room for imagination in visuals, it becomes less grim because of that. I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe just the fact of using this kind of heavy material for comics, which are usually considered lightweight, is well established. In fact, the first graphic novel that was serious was about the Holocaust. It was Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and it was his father's story, and the Jews are depicted as mice, Germans are cats, and you have some pigs there as well. And that's a heavy, heavy book. But I think, again, it's heavy because of the specific characters. His father was a very difficult guy, and his relationship, Spiegelman's relationship to his father was difficult, and in fact that was the reason he made the book. Not in order to talk about the Holocaust. It was a way to connect to his father. So again, in every big, horrible issue, when it boils down to a human level, it becomes communicative.
What would you say is your favorite page or panel from the book?
Oh, it's hard to tell. I like the emotionally. I'm really connected to the one that I've showed you towards the end of the presentation. I think we still have it. When she's older, what she would look like when she would be, because. And there are some parts that I'm proud of. Technically, I really like the drawings. I'm looking, oh, that's pretty. I made it. No, I don't. It's gone. Yeah.
I just wanted to know, in this process, do the words follow the picture or the picture follow the words? I mean, how is it important?
The words are, I always start with words. The picture always follows the words, and I think that's the main difference between illustration and fine art. The illustrations are in service of the text. Once you have the text written down, oh, here it is. So think this is my favorite illustration from the book. Once you have the text, the images have the freedom to go in between the lines, even to contradict the text. This is in my case specifically, and I've done a lot of children's books and films and stuff like that. None of them were my initiative. I always react, and I think this is why I am an illustrator and not a painter. I don't feel that I have anything to say important enough until somebody says, let's talk about this. Then I become clever, and then no, you're not right. But to stand up by myself and say, we're doing a book about Anne Frank, never.